One of the things I've always collected throughout my life has been bits and pieces of random facts and trivia. And while it's not exciting for your everyday man on the street, I can't get enough of it, especially when it comes to history stories. So anyway, here's a whole bunch of short tales and trivia from the American Civil War. We begin with George Barnhart Zimpelman, a soldier in Terry's Texas Rangers of the CSA, who took part in more than 400 battles up to May 1865. And while he had numerous horses shot out from under him, he was only wounded twice, the second of which maiming him for life. Despite this track record, he never actually went above the rank of private, as he chose to decline any offer of promotion. He's arguably the war's most travelled soldier. It was said, to kill a single enemy combatant, that it took a man's weight in lead shot being fired. A Union soldier once said it took 240 pounds of powder and 900 pounds of lead to kill a single Confederate. Upon hearing, at the start of the war, a Frenchman by the name of Monsieur Chillon, himself a veteran of the French army, walked from California through native lands to reach the Confederate States. Accompanied only by his donkey Jason, who he slept with for warmth, he eventually made his way to the 3rd Louisiana Regiment of the Confederate Army, a French-speaking regiment, and he settled in. It is said that one night Jason the donkey mistook the regiment's colonel for Monsieur Chillon, and after he'd gone to sleep, the donkey entered his tent and tried to sleep on his bed, much to the shock of the colonel and the delight of the troops. During war, there were two brothers, Jack and Jasper Walker from Charlotte, North Carolina, that fought at the Battle of Gettysburg with the 13th North Carolina Regiment. Jasper was wounded on July 1st, the 5th colour bearer of the regiment to be shot. He was captured and his leg was amputated. His brother, Jack, was later shot as the Confederate army was in retreat, and he too was captured. His left leg was also amputated. After the war, both returned home and lived a rather comfortable life, becoming well known as they walked around town together on peg legs. On Jasper's wedding day, his peg leg broke, and in a moment of quick thinking, Jack took off his own and gave it to his brother, who found it to be a perfect fit. Jasper was successfully married while wearing his brother's leg. Less lucky were the Gillette brothers, Captain S. Isidore Gillette being the last of 4 to be killed, all while riding the same horse. His last words were to will the animal to a nephew. Another Frenchman who wanted to join the Confederacy, Claude Pardignon, challenged the ship's skipper, who was delivering him across the Atlantic, to a duel, after he refused to provide him with a toothbrush. There was a German soldier who signed on with the Army of Northern Virginia, who refused to live in the regiment's camp. Instead, sleeping in a hut made of leaves and brush away from the rest of the men. It's also said that for the entirety of his service, he never once said an understandable word to another soldier. The Union commander at Fort Sumter, Robert Anderson, was a former slave owner, and his father, who had crossed the Delaware with George Washington, had, by coincidence, been stationed at Fort Moultrie, Sumter's predecessor in Charleston Harbor during the American Revolution. In 1863, the pay of a Confederate Army private was raised from $11 a month to $18 a month, after it was discovered that in Virginia, slaves were being hired by officers for $30 a month, a discrepancy that was unacceptable to the Confederate Army. Also regarding pay, until French sharpshooter John Ozanne of the Confederate Army resigned from his rank of lieutenant in protest, officers in the Confederate Army had to pay for their own food, clothing, and equipment. After his resignation made him a hero to other officers, the CSA signed a law providing supplies to all officers. In the Union Army, there were a company made up entirely of bare-knuckle boxers, another of butchers, and another of musicians. One company was made up entirely of members of the Temperance Union, and they all went into battle sober. The 126th New York was made up of members of the YMCA, and one regiment was formed of German lumberjacks, who were later made better use of to cut and haul wood for Mississippi River steamers and anti-guerrilla actions. One naval battle ended with embarrassment for both Union and Confederate sailors. At the mouth of the Yazoo River in July 1862, the Confederate ironclad ram Arkansas fought with the Union ironclad gunboat Carondelet. Despite being unable to damage the Confederate ironclad, the Union sailors stayed in the fight, eventually being crippled by the Confederate ship. After which, the gunboat pulled up alongside the ironclad in a last-ditch boarding action, but as the Union sailors jumped aboard the Arkansas, the Confederates simply went below decks and shut the hatches behind them, leaving the Union sailors in control of the deck, but unable to carry on the fight. Both ships eventually got away. Throughout his career, renowned bastard Nathan Bedford Forrest had 29 horses shot out from under him. There was a Confederate private, Abraham Lincoln, who served in Company F of the 1st Virginia Cavalry. In 1864, it was reported he had deserted. Before the war, Jesse Grant, the father of Ulysses, lived and worked in the home of Owen Brown, who had a son, John Brown. Upon hearing of the surrender at Appomattox, North Carolinian Dick Ragland, a man from a wealthy plantation family, swore to never work again and never go north of the Potomac or south of Atlanta, Georgia for as long as he lived. He was last seen as late as 1910, a vagrant traveller who moved from town to town, shaggy and unkempt, with only a pack on his back and carrying a long stick with his old army bayonet fixed on the end. The town of Galena, Illinois, population 15,000, produced 8 Union generals, most likely due to their relation with Ulysses S. Grant, the town's most famous resident. One private, in the 1st Michigan Cavalry, brought his wife along with him to camp. Mrs. Bridget Divers, also known as Irish Biddy, a small woman with a cheery nature, made a name for herself by volunteering to stand picket duty for the camp, riding on raids against Confederate camps, and on one occasion bluffed her way into a Confederate camp in order to reclaim the body of a fallen captain. She also served as a nurse and assisted in surgeries, and became a familiar face to hundreds if not thousands of troops. It's said that she was responsible during the Battle of Seven Pines for rallying a retreating regiment and urging them back to their positions. It's said that the last combat death of Grant's forces was at the hands of Robert E. Lee's cook, Captain Joel Compton of Gretna, Virginia. A champion wrestler within the Army of Northern Virginia, he accidentally killed a Union soldier in a friendly match following the surrender at Appomattox. He himself would live on till 1932, dying at age 90 as a die-hard Confederate. It is said that, by coincidence, one Confederate ended up making the monument to the general he shot. Some years after the war, Pennsylvania decided to construct a monument to the war dead, and a statue with General John Reynolds, who had fallen at Gettysburg, was to be included. An official from Pennsylvania went down to a quarry in Mount Airy, North Carolina to inspect progress. He noticed the statue of the general and commented on it, to which his guide pointed at a quarry worker and said, "And there's the man who killed him." That man was Frank Woods, who, as the story goes, got separated from his company along with another soldier called Private Cox, and decided to take a chance shot after finding himself flanking a Union position. He took a single shot at an officer with, quote, "lots of gold braid about him," and saw him go down. After the war, he returned to North Carolina and became a toolsmith for the quarry, the same quarry that was now building the monument upon which his victim stood. In 1942, a Marine fighter squadron on Guadalcanal billed itself as Con 4 Sols, the Confederate forces of the Solomons. And finally, the last deaths by Confederate artillery were recorded during the Second World War, at Fort Macon in North Carolina, when a cannonball which was being used to prop up firewood that was being burnt turned out to be a powder-filled artillery round, and exploded, killing 2 and injuring others. A local newspaper proclaimed, "Confederate shell kills 2 Yankee soldiers 80 years after it was fired." And while there are many more odd and interesting stories from the time, I think I've covered enough here for one video. If you enjoyed this experiment of a video, let me know, and as always, regular videos are in production, and I am continuing to work on other short documentaries. Thanks for watching, important links are in the description as always, and goodbye.